They say you always remember the moment your heart shatters. For me, it was under a canopy of crystal chandeliers and violin music, surrounded by the people I once called family. I stood there in a red silk gown, smiling like a fool, believing that tonight would be the happiest night of my life. My fiancé, Julian, took the stage. The spotlight hit his golden hair, his perfect smile, his polished charm. My heart beat faster as he reached into his jacket pocket. But he didn't walk toward me. He turned, to my sister. The applause was deafening. The air was thick. And I stopped breathing. Julian knelt in front of Alara, holding out the diamond ring I had helped him pick. She gasped, acting surprised, tears in her eyes. They called it love. I called it betrayal. I don't remember how I got outside. The cold air stung my lungs as I stumbled into the dark, blinded by headlights and humiliation. I remember the screech of tires. Then nothing. Until I woke up. My eyes opened to silk sheets and moonlight pouring through my bedroom window. I sat up, gasping, expecting pain, but my body was whole. I looked around, my red dress hung in the closet. My phone still showed unread messages from Julian, the same ones he sent the morning of the gala. It was the same day. The same hour. I was back. My fingers trembled, then curled into fists. Not again. This time, I wouldn't stand on the sidelines of my own life. This time, they'd pay for what they did. Not just for betraying me, but for thinking I would stay quiet. I smiled in the mirror, slow and sharp. You want a show, Alara? I'll give you one they'll never forget. I started small. I played the role of the doting fiancé perfectly. Laughing at Julian's jokes, brushing Alara's hair behind her ear like I used to, telling our parents how lucky I was. All lies. Every word I spoke was a thread I wove into a trap. And they were walking right into it. Julian leaned closer every day, confident in his deception. Alara giggled more, acting like a friend, like a sister. But I saw it, the smugness behind her smile, the way she clutched her phone a little tighter when I entered a room. They thought I was still naive, still soft. They didn't know that I remembered everything. And I had a plan. First, I planted a voice recorder in Julian's office, tucked into a decorative vase no one ever dusted. I knew what they'd say. I had heard it the first time around, the night I died. Sure enough, within hours, I had a recording of Julian telling Alara that the proposal was just a formality. That the merger deal with our family's company needed to go through first. That I was a stepping stone. I transferred the audio to a flash drive, made 3 copies, and locked them away. Next, I scheduled a private meeting with an investor, Dallin Knox. The name alone made boardrooms go silent. Ruthless. Untouchable. He was the man Julian had always feared. I knew he'd be at the gala. I knew he'd be watching. At the charity auction the night before the event, I approached him. I wore a black velvet gown and a diamond choker, the same one Julian once said made me look too intense. Dallin's eyes met mine across the room. Cold. Calculating. But when I smiled, he blinked. As if something shifted. Miss Avellini, he said, voice like cut glass. I hear your family's company is looking for new alliances. Only with men who don't mistake me for an ornament, I replied. His lips twitched. Not a smile. A recognition. I didn't need him. But aligning myself with him sent a message. I wasn't alone this time. I wasn't powerless. The night of the gala arrived. Everything was perfect. Alara wore white, how fitting. Julian was radiant, rehearsed, smug. I wore red again, because this time it was war paint. As the orchestra played and guests swirled champagne, I gave the signal. My tech contact triggered the projection. The giant screen above the stage flickered to life, then came the audio. Julian's voice filled the hall, speaking of betrayal, strategy, and conquest. My name was mentioned like I was a pawn. The silence afterward was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Alara froze. Julian turned pale. Our father nearly dropped his glass. I walked out as the room erupted. And there he was. Dallin Knox, waiting by the stairs. Unbothered. Impressed. You timed that well, he said. I always liked fireworks, I replied. His arm extended. I took it. Let them watch. This was only the beginning. The headlines the next morning were delicious. Heiress exposes fiancé's betrayal at gala, socialite sister caught in love triangle, scandal, investor Dallin Knox spotted leaving with Avellini Thorne. I sipped my espresso as the morning news anchors fumbled over each detail. The footage had gone viral. Julian's calculated words, Alara's stunned face, the eerie calm with which I walked away. No tears. No screaming. Just precision. And the final blow, me disappearing on the arm of the most feared investor in the country. I had handed them humiliation on a silver platter. Julian tried to call. I blocked him. Alara texted me a paragraph filled with lies, feigned confusion, and desperate pleas to talk. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their silence in the media only made them look guiltier. Exactly as I intended. But I wasn't done. The real game was just beginning. By noon, I was at Valen Knox's corporate tower, 35 floors of mirrored steel and fear. He'd sent a single message after the gala, "Come see me. We have things to discuss." His assistant led me through a sleek hallway, past glass walls and men in tailored suits who all lowered their voices when they saw me. The silence was reverent. Like they already knew I wasn't just another scandalized heiress. I was the woman who pulled the trigger. Valen stood behind his desk, reading a report. He didn't look up until the assistant left. "You handled last night with elegance," he said. "I wasn't aiming for elegance," I replied. "I was aiming for ruin." He smiled faintly. "You hit your mark." I studied him. His silver tie was immaculately knotted. His cufflinks were engraved with the Knox insignia. His eyes, dark and still, watched me like a puzzle he already knew the shape of. "You wanted a meeting." "I'm here," I said. "Why?" "You've just destroyed a man with more political backing than most cabinet ministers," he said. "That either makes you reckless, or very, very useful. And which am I?" He walked around the desk and leaned against it. "That's what I intend to find out." He offered me a consulting role. Media strategy, brand control, public relations warfare. I wouldn't be an employee. I'd be a weapon. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you've proven you can play their game and win," he said. "Most women in your position would have cried. Hidden. You turned your pain into precision. I can work with that." I considered it. This wasn't just a job. It was power. Influence. Proximity to a man who could bury my enemies with a single call. But I wouldn't grovel. I wanted this on my terms. "I'll do it," I said, "but I want full control over my image. I'm not a puppet, and I don't want to be polished." He nodded once. "Deal." The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, headlines, and rising influence. I curated my persona carefully, poised, unapologetic, sharp-tongued when necessary. Interviews flooded in. I declined most. The mystery made me more powerful. Meanwhile, Julian's company began to buckle. Investors pulled out. His father released a statement condemning his actions. Alara, desperate to salvage her reputation, gave an interview claiming I had set her up. The public didn't buy it. Too little, too late. Valen and I worked late into the evenings, analyzing data, orchestrating leaks, redirecting narratives. He was brilliant, cold, controlled, unreadable. But when we spoke, I sensed something deeper. An understanding. A mirror. One night, he looked at me across his office and said, "You know, most people would be satisfied by now. You've embarrassed them. You've ruined their careers. You've won." I met his gaze. "I haven't taken everything yet." He nodded slowly. "Then we continue. We made an excellent team. But revenge has a cost, and I knew mine would come due." One afternoon, I received a letter. No sender listed. Just a gold-embossed envelope addressed to me in elegant cursive. Inside was a photo. A younger me. Smiling. Holding Julian's hand. Alara standing in the background, her expression unreadable. On the back, in scrawled ink, "You may have forgotten what you looked like before you became this." But I haven't. There was no signature. No message beyond that. For a moment, I felt the ground shift. I hadn't expected sentiment. Or guilt. But it wasn't guilt that twisted in my chest, it was the memory of who I used to be. The softness. The trust. The illusion. I burned the photo. That girl died the night she watched her fiancé kneel to her sister. I had no use for ghosts. The next morning, I bought out one of Julian's suppliers, a key logistics company, and terminated all future contracts with him. Publicly. Ruthlessly. Valen raised an eyebrow when he saw the news. "You're escalating," he said. "I'm finishing what I started." He leaned closer. "Just don't forget, Avellini, when you climb too high, the fall is deadly." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then I'll make sure there's no one left to push me." Power tastes nothing like I expected. It doesn't come with applause or satisfaction. It comes with silence. Heavy. Expectant. The kind that settles when people walk into a room and hold their breath, wondering what you'll do next. That silence followed me everywhere now. Through boardrooms, charity galas, private lounges filled with trembling executives trying to pretend they didn't once mock me at their dinner tables. Let them pretend. I had no interest in their guilt. Only their obedience. Julian had gone quiet publicly. But behind the scenes, he was flailing. Investors abandoned him. Our old friends ghosted him. His once adoring family suddenly remembered they'd always had doubts about him. He tried reaching out again, through intermediaries, anonymous letters, even a journalist begging for a quote. He wanted to salvage something. Maybe his image. Maybe me. Pathetic. Alara was another story. She rebranded herself as the innocent caught in a tragic misunderstanding. Her social media was filled with curated vulnerability. Cryptic captions about betrayals I never saw coming and selfies with tear-stained cheeks and designer handbags. The public wasn't buying it. But she wasn't the one I was watching. I had my eye on their enabler. Councilman Darren Holt. He had backed Julian's startup with government incentives and conveniently looked the other way when certain contracts got fast-tracked. Corruption dressed in champagne and tailored suits. Holt was slippery. But no one was untouchable. Especially not when I had Valen Knox on my side. I brought it up during a late-night strategy meeting. We were alone in his penthouse suite, an ultramodern expanse of black marble and glass perched above the city like a throne room. Holt protected Julian, I said, placing a manila folder on the table. I want him exposed. Valen didn't blink. You're not satisfied with just Julian and Alara? This isn't about satisfaction, I replied. It's about cleaning house. He opened the folder and scanned the contents. Emails. Transaction records. A leaked voicemail. When he looked up, his gaze lingered on me a beat longer than usual. You're dangerous. I leaned in. You knew that the moment you offered me a seat at your table. He gave a rare smile, sharp and brief. Then he picked up the phone and made a single call. By morning, Councilman Holt was trending. Corruption allegations rock prominent councilman anonymous source provides evidence of fraud Holt tied to scandal-plagued tech company. I didn't need credit. I didn't want headlines. I wanted consequences. And I got them. Holt was suspended from his position within 48 hours. Investigations launched. His political allies scattered like rats from a sinking ship. And Julian? His last remaining lifeline was gone. That afternoon, Valen poured us 2 glasses of scotch in his office and handed me one without speaking. I raised it. To demolition. To reconstruction, he replied. I tilted my head. You think that's what I'm doing? Rebuilding? You're clearing the field, he said. Sooner or later, you'll want something to build on it. His voice was steady, but I noticed something new in his eyes, something softer. A flicker of curiosity beneath the armor. We drank in silence. The kind of silence I was beginning to enjoy. But it didn't last. 3 days later, I received an invitation. White envelope. No sender. Embossed gold trim. Elegant. Familiar. You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Julian Carter and Alara Thorne. I laughed out loud. A slow, stunned, almost delighted laugh. They were doubling down. They wanted to pretend none of it mattered. That they could rewrite the narrative and crawl back into society's good graces. A new venue. A new proposal. A new performance. They were going to stage the engagement I had ruined, this time without me in the picture. How quaint. I handed the invitation to Valen during a brunch meeting. He skimmed it, then set it down. Are you going? Absolutely, I said. But not as a guest. He raised an eyebrow. You're planning something. I'm executing something. And I was. I already had the threads in place. Julian's company's collapse had attracted plenty of attention. Journalists, investigators, business analysts. One particular reporter, Leanne Voss, had been trying to get an interview with me for weeks. Instead, I gave her something better, access to my files. My recordings. My digital copies of internal financial documents, all gathered during my time as his fiancée. I made her promise one thing, she could publish it all, but only the morning after the engagement party. Let them toast. Let them smile for the cameras. Let them believe they'd escaped. Then let them drown. You're enjoying this, Valen said quietly, as we rode the elevator down to the parking garage. I met his gaze. You think I shouldn't? I think there's a difference between enjoying justice, he said, and enjoying blood. I considered that. Then I said, they spilled mine first. He didn't argue. But as I stepped into my car, I saw something strange in his expression. A flicker of hesitation. As if he saw something in me he recognized. Or feared. I didn't care. This time, I wasn't just surviving betrayal. I was turning it into spectacle. The engagement party was held at the Albrecht estate, a sprawling vineyard an hour outside the city, known for hosting the most exclusive events for the kind of people who only smiled when cameras were present. The invitation said black tie and no press allowed. I showed up in a dress that didn't just defy their rules, it mocked them. Sleek silver satin that clung to every line of my body, paired with heels sharp enough to draw blood. I didn't arrive quietly. I made sure the valet whispered my name. I made sure Alara saw me the moment I stepped inside. She blinked. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. Then she composed herself. Avellini, she said, gliding toward me in a gown far too bridal for an engagement party. You came. I wouldn't miss it, I said, brushing a kiss to her cheek like we were still sisters. Julian wasn't far behind. His smile was forced. His eyes darted to the photographers, the guests, the donors. Everyone watched us. Of course they did. I tilted my head, giving him my most innocent look. No hard feelings, Julian. We were young, right? Mistakes happen. His jaw clenched. Right. I walked away before he could speak again, letting them stand there and try to figure out what I had planned. Because that was the worst part, not knowing. They would cling to their glasses and their smiles, wondering if I'd brought a bomb. I hadn't. Not tonight. The bomb was coming in the morning. Tonight, I was the fuse. I mingled with their guests, accepted compliments from women who had once pitied me, danced with sons of foreign ministers who had once called me cold. I was cold now, polished and precise. Every conversation was a performance. Every smile was a weapon. And the entire night, I could feel Valen's eyes on me. He stood at the far end of the room, leaning against the marble bar, watching me like I was a storm he'd seen before. Unmoved. Unafraid. Until I walked straight toward him. You said you weren't coming, I said, lifting a glass of champagne. I changed my mind, he replied. Curiosity got the better of me. Curious about what? Whether you'd burn it down from inside, he said, or wait until morning. I smiled. I like the suspense. His gaze sharpened. So do I. We didn't dance. That would have been too obvious. But we stood close enough to draw attention. I could feel people staring. Whispers floated through the air, speculation, envy, fear. The girl who was supposed to be ruined now had the most powerful man in the room at her side. And she wasn't afraid to use him. At midnight, the cake was rolled out. Cameras clicked. Alara gave a teary speech about love and destiny. Julian smiled like he wasn't seconds from collapse. I clapped politely. Took a sip of champagne. And slipped out through the garden gate just before the fireworks began. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow, they'd choke. By dawn, every major financial outlet had published Leon Voss's article. Fraud. Embezzlement. Insider trading. Backroom deals with politicians. Stolen investor funds. And my voice, captured in recordings, narrating the downfall. Julian's company was finished. Alara's social media accounts were deactivated within the hour. The Thorn name was dragged through the mud, and this time, there was no mystery about who lit the match. Valen called me at 8 a.m. You've made your point, he said. That wasn't the point, I replied. That was the warning. He paused. What's the point then? Legacy. He was silent for a moment. Then, come to the tower. I want to show you something. I arrived half an hour later. His office was empty, but a private elevator was waiting for me. I took it to the rooftop. Where Valen stood by a long glass table, 2 cups of coffee and a leather folder waiting. Inside the folder, floor plans, shareholder documents, and a proposal. Your family's company is bleeding, he said. Your father backed Julian. That means the scandal touches them. Investors are pulling out. Morale is dropping. I skimmed the documents. You want me to buy them out? No, he said. I want us to buy them out. I looked up slowly. You've proven you're more than a woman with a grudge, he said. You understand power. Optics. Leverage. I don't need a figurehead. I need a partner. My breath caught, just for a second. Not because of the opportunity, but because of how easily he saw me. Not as a woman to be saved. Not as a scandal to be managed. But as an equal. What's in it for you? I asked. He gave me that same unreadable smile. I like things that are sharp. And I don't like wasting potential. I closed the folder. I'll think about it. His eyes didn't leave mine. Do that. But don't take too long. The throne doesn't stay empty for long. As I walked away, I realized something chilling. I had spent weeks crafting the perfect revenge. But somewhere along the way, I had become something else. Not the woman who lost everything. The woman who had everything to gain. My father called the next day. I let it ring twice before answering. You've made quite the mess, he said. No preamble. No greeting. I cleaned one up, I replied. You're welcome. There was silence on the line. The kind that came before a storm or surrender. He was calculating his next move. He always had been a businessman before a parent. The board is in chaos, he said eventually. They're threatening to replace me. Half our partners have pulled out since your little stunt. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Then it's a good thing I have a solution. Avellini, this is not your fight, it became mine the moment you chose Julian over me, I said, my voice like frost. You backed a liar and ignored every warning. You didn't protect me. Now I'm not here to beg. I'm here to buy. He exhaled. Sharp. Angry. You think you can just walk in and take control? I already did, I said. I own 25%. Through shell companies. Through friends you didn't think I had. Through investors who saw what I did to Julian and decided they wanted to be on the winning side. Another pause. What do you want? Your resignation. You're bluffing. Try me, I said. I'll call an emergency board meeting tomorrow and announce your failure live. You'll lose everything. Or you can walk away quietly and save your legacy. I hung up. That afternoon, I sat across from Valen in a private lounge that overlooked the skyline. The city glittered beneath us like it was made of diamonds. Or broken glass. You're taking the company, he said. I nodded. He doesn't deserve it. He never did. Valen watched me for a long moment. What happens when you win? I haven't thought that far ahead. You should. I looked at him. Why? Are you planning on getting in my way? He leaned in, his voice low. No. I'm planning on standing beside you. But I don't want to build an empire with a ghost. His words lingered. Unexpected. Heavy. What makes you think I'm a ghost? Because I've seen what revenge does, he said. It feeds you until you forget what hunger feels like. Then one day, you're full, but you're still starving. I didn't answer. Not because he was wrong. But because I wasn't ready to admit he was right. The next morning, my father announced his retirement. He cited health reasons. The press accepted it. The board nodded. I was voted in as interim CEO the same day. I walked into the building like it belonged to me, because now, it did. Every hallway. Every smirking executive who had once whispered about how broken I must be. Every assistant who had pitted me. The conference room doors opened and the applause was polite, reserved, uncertain. They weren't sure if they were welcoming a savior or a tyrant. I didn't care. I took my seat at the head of the table. I'm not here to fix what's broken, I said. I'm here to build something that can't be broken. They listened. Because they had no choice. Julian made one last attempt to reach me. A handwritten letter, delivered through one of my new assistants. He said he missed me. That he didn't know what he was doing. That he'd made a mistake. I sent it back. Unopened. With a single note scribbled in my own hand. You were never mine to lose. But I was yours to destroy. You did that. Enjoy the silence. Valen read it and didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, what happens now? I rebuild, I said. Stronger. Smarter. Colder. Alone? The word hung between us. Not an accusation. Not a plea. Just a question. I'm not sure yet, I said. Let me know, he said. I don't mind the cold. And I believed him. But I wasn't done testing him. Power changes people. Or maybe it reveals them. And I had no intention of being blindsided again. Not by love. Not by loyalty. Not even by him. Power made people nervous around me. I noticed it in the way their eyes flicked down when I passed, in how they straightened their backs before addressing me, in the silence that followed my name in every meeting. Avellini Thorne had gone from discarded fiancé to headline-grabbing CEO in less than 2 months, and no one knew what to do with that. They whispered words like ruthless and brilliant and dangerous. They weren't wrong. I didn't care if they liked me. I didn't need their approval. I just needed their obedience. Still, there were moments, quiet, lingering ones, when I felt the chill of it all. I had climbed so fast, cut so clean, that I'd barely looked back. But even wolves need something that's theirs. Valen had become a constant. A looming shadow in sharp suits. He didn't flatter or fawn. He observed. Waited. Occasionally offered insight that I hadn't asked for, but never demanded more than I was willing to give. He didn't get in my way. And more than once, he got things out of mine. He was power, restrained. The kind I respected. The kind I wasn't sure I trusted. One evening, after a brutal merger negotiation, I stepped into his office unannounced. He was alone, nursing a glass of bourbon, staring at the skyline like it owed him something. "Tell me something," I said, closing the door behind me. He turned, but didn't look surprised. "What kind of something?" "Why me?" I asked. "Why offer to stand beside me? What's in it for you, Valen?" He leaned back, considering. Then said, "You remind me of the part of myself I didn't have the nerve to become." I raised an eyebrow. "Cold?" "Unapologetic," he said. "Most people burn out trying to play both sides, power and morality. You didn't bother pretending they could coexist." I didn't know whether to thank him or slap him for that. "I'm not heartless," I said. "No," he replied. "But you've learned how to use your heart like a weapon. That's rarer than you think." There was a beat of silence. Then I asked, "Do you want me, Valen? Or do you want what I can do?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Yes." I stared at him. He clarified. "I want you. Because of what you can do. Because you see things others don't. Because you don't flinch. I don't need decoration, Avellini. I need someone who can sit beside me at the throne and still hold a dagger under the table." I walked to him, slowly. Our faces inches apart. "And what if I decide to cut you with it?" I whispered. His voice was steady. "Then I'll know I chose right." It was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever heard from him. I didn't kiss him. Not yet. That would have been too easy. Too soon. I just turned and walked out. Let him wait. I had one last piece of revenge to complete before I let myself feel anything more. Julian was fading from the public eye. Alara had gone radio silent since the exposé. But they still had one weapon left, their pity narrative. Rumors swirled that they were moving abroad, launching some charity initiative, trying to rebrand as victims of scandal. It would have worked, on people dumber than me. So I made sure it didn't. I anonymously donated every receipt, every confession, every leaked voice note to a nonprofit investigative podcast that specialized in high society scandals. The host, a sharp woman with a venomous voice, took them apart episode by episode. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every instance of calculated betrayal. It was the final blow. Not loud. Not explosive. But thorough. By the end of the month, Julian's name was permanently tied to fraud, deceit, and weakness. Alara's was synonymous with betrayal. They didn't just lose. They were forgotten. And I became the reason people in power started checking under their beds. One night, Valen called me up to the roof again. He was wearing black, his hair a little undone, eyes unreadable. "I'm leaving for Geneva tomorrow," he said. 6 months. Corporate expansion. I nodded. "And? I want you to come." I didn't flinch. "Why?" "Because you've built your empire here. You've proved your point. But it's time to stop being the girl who was betrayed. And start being the woman who owns the world." I looked at him, long and hard. "I haven't finished building," I said. His voice was low. "Then let me build it with you." This time, I didn't walk away. I stepped into him, placed my hand over his heart, and said, "Only if you understand one thing." "Say it." "I don't belong to anyone. Not anymore." His hand closed over mine. "Then I'll earn it," he said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed someone. Not because I needed to. But because I chose to. I didn't go to Geneva with him. Not right away. Dallin left with a promise that the world was wide enough for people like us, cold, carved from war, built to conquer. He said he'd wait, but he wouldn't stand still. I respected that. I didn't need a man who waited. I needed one who understood I moved in storms, not in steps. While he carved out new territory in Europe, I expanded here. Bought out smaller firms, turned them profitable in weeks. I turned the Thorn Corporation from a legacy brand into something sleek, ruthless, invincible. My name was no longer a scandal. It was a standard. The more I won, the more people questioned me behind closed doors. How did she do it? How did she rise so fast, so clean, so controlled? They didn't understand the kind of clarity you earn when you watch yourself die. When your heart breaks so violently it never grows back the same way. One night, I visited the old estate. The one where it all began. Where Julian knelt before Alara and thought he'd won. It was empty now. The family had sold it. Too many bad memories, the realtor whispered. I walked through the grand ballroom, echoing and cold. My heels tapped across marble that once felt like glass beneath me. I stood in the exact place where my past ended and my war began. I waited to feel something, pain, rage, maybe even nostalgia. I felt nothing. The girl who stood here in a red dress, full of hope and nerves and trust, she was gone. She'd burned that night. What rose in her place wasn't a phoenix. It was something sharper. Smarter. Stronger. A week later, I flew to Geneva. Dallin met me at the private terminal. No dramatic gestures. No flowers. Just him, in that tailored black coat, watching me descend the steps like he'd been waiting his whole life to see me walk into his domain. You came, he said. I built what I needed to, I said. Now I'm ready for more. He walked beside me in silence for a while. Then asked, and are you done chasing ghosts? I don't chase, I replied. I bury. He smirked. Then let's start digging. We worked together like we'd been born for it. Europe bowed faster than I expected. Our names became a whispered pairing in every boardroom, Knox and Thorn. The cold investor and the fire-forged queen. Some said he tamed me. Others said I melted him. They were all wrong. We sharpened each other. At night, when the city quieted and our work was done, he would pour 2 glasses of wine and sit beside me in silence. No promises. No pretenses. Just understanding. Eventually, the lines blurred. I let him touch the parts of me I hadn't realized were still soft. He never asked for more than I gave, but he knew when I needed to be reminded I was still human. I let myself love him, not because I needed him, but because I chose him. That choice made all the difference. One morning, while reviewing a list of new acquisitions, I found something that made me pause. A luxury estate in the Alps. Remote. Elegant. Untouched. The same estate where Julian and Alara had planned to honeymoon. It had been seized in the aftermath of Julian's collapse, left abandoned. I bought it. I didn't even hesitate. Dallin raised an eyebrow when I told him. Closure? He asked. Ownership, I said. I rebuilt it, not as a romantic escape, but as a retreat for women like me. Women who had been broken, betrayed, underestimated. I called it the Citadel. It was quiet. Serene. And impossible to get into unless I let you in. A few months later, I received a letter from Alara. It was short. Bitter. A blend of apology and accusation. She blamed Julian. Then me. Then herself. She asked me to meet her. I folded the letter and burned it in my fireplace. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure. I had something better. Victory. Real victory isn't loud. It doesn't always end in applause. Sometimes it looks like peace. Like silence. Like being able to walk into a room, knowing there's not a single person left who could hurt you. Dallin poured me a drink that night. We sat on the balcony overlooking Geneva. Below us, the city glittered. Above us, the stars didn't care what we'd done to get here. He looked at me. Do you ever miss who you used to be? I considered it. No, I said. She got me killed. He nodded once. And who are you now? I raised my glass. The woman they never saw coming. 6 months later, the world looked different. I stood at the center of a marble-floored conference room in Shanghai, surrounded by executives from 3 continents who had flown in just to sign over their power. They tried to hide their nerves behind handshakes and smiles, but I could see it in their posture. The way they hesitated to speak before me. The way they deferred to my nod. I had become more than a name. I was a storm that didn't pass. A reminder that the ones they discarded could rise. That pretty faces could sharpen into blades. When the contracts were signed, they asked for a photo. I allowed it. They didn't know the image would end up on the cover of international business journals by morning. The caption was simple: Thorn ascends. I returned to Geneva that evening. Dallin waited for me in our private suite, holding a single glass of wine. Not to celebrate, but to acknowledge. We didn't need grand declarations. He understood the weight of what I'd done, what we'd built. "You're quieter than usual," he said, as I kicked off my heels and leaned back against the velvet couch. "I was thinking," I said. "About what?" "About endings." He tensed, just slightly. "And beginnings?" I looked at him. Maybe they're the same thing. I could see the questions in his eyes, the unspoken ones. Was I tired? Was I content? Would I leave? He had never asked for promises. He knew better. But he was hoping I'd offer one anyway. I reached for his glass and took a sip. Then I said, "Do you remember what I told you the night you asked me to come with you? You said you didn't belong to anyone." And I meant it. A beat passed. Then I added, "But I've stopped running." He didn't move, didn't smile, didn't flinch. But something in him softened. "I never wanted to tame you, Avellini," he said quietly. "Just to stand beside you, if you'd let me." "I know." It was the most honest moment we'd ever shared. Later that night, we stood together on the rooftop, the lights of the city glittering like embers below. I watched my reflection in the glass, standing shoulder to shoulder with a man no one dared cross. My story had started in fire and betrayal, but it hadn't ended there. It ended here. Not with revenge. Not with fury. But with control. With peace. With love, not as weakness, but as something I chose freely, fully, without fear. I still wore red when I wanted to. Not because it reminded me of blood. But because it reminded me I survived. And when I walked into boardrooms, people still whispered. "There she is. The girl who rose from scandal. The girl who destroyed a dynasty. The girl who caught the eye of the coldest man in the world, and never once bowed her head." No one knew what I'd do next. That was the beauty of it. Because now, everything I touched wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving that I was always right to burn it all down.